Hello, everyone. Welcome to Your World or Mine. Show me yours and I'll show you mine. And today we have Flemming here, and he's quite an interesting human being that we came across on our visit here on Earth. And as you know, I'm alien, and we're really interested on my planet, how humanity is doing at this time, what's happening in the world, and more importantly, how is things really going? Because we're curious, we're looking with our binoculars at you, and we have our own perceptions, but we want to hear it from the horse's mouth. It's much better when it's a direct experience. So thank you, Flemming, for joining me here today.
It's a pleasure for me to be here. This sounds interesting.
Well, this alien doesn't eat human beings, firstly. And the first thing the alien is interested in to know is that you're apparently a very interesting person in the sense that you do all these interesting experiments. Can you tell us what that's all about? Are you a scientist?
No, I'm not, but yes, I like exploring different kinds of things. And recently it has in part been how to have conversations. So I'm sort of looking for different ways for people to interact with each other, different ways of doing something together, working together. And I've sort of discovered that often what gets in the way is that we're not terribly good at communicating with each other without it going wrong, without us getting into sort of a fight or judging each other or condemning each other and leaving. And so a lot of it is just communicating, is just being present with each other. So I'd like to explore different approaches to how to be together in a deeper way, and also in a more productive way. And also experiments sort of fits my mindset well. I don't like when things are scripted in advance. I like when it's an adventure or a quest or an experiment, something that sort of unfolds and is discovered along the way. And I like that way of sort of looking at the world as something to discover, as a mystery to solve right now or to move towards solving. We don't solve it all right away. There's always more, but I like that way of looking at it.
So when you say, I'm curious now, when you talk about being present to each other, in your experience and from your understanding of this moment in time, what is that exactly?
Well, that's not entirely clear either what that is. I mean, if you just ask people to be present, they don't necessarily know what to do. Like being present often starts from a fairly quiet place. Like to be present, you need to pay attention to a lot of things, both to yourself, your body. How do you feel? How are you where you are right now? Where are you? What's going on? What's here? What do you feel? What do you sense? And then other people. So one first needs to do that for oneself before one can start paying attention to others, like what's going on with them, what changes when these other people are here, and try to listen and understand and sense what are these other people about. And then together we can get to, well, what's there to happen together with us, what's ready to emerge when we are here right now. And in principle, that's very simple, but humans have a rather hard time sort of just relaxing and doing that. We're often busy proving things or trying to do things that are important, that gets in the way, instead of just letting happen what wants to happen or what needs to happen right now. So I'd like to explore getting better at that, because I think it's somewhat of a secret or a key for humanity to work together better. If we can just sort of start with being here fairly comfortably, we can go from there. And we haven't even done that very well.
So you know what immediately comes up for me now is, can we try it now? Just being present, I want to experiment with that too, to see what happens when me and you now, in this moment, different locations on the universe, in the planets, and to see what emerges in that way.
Let's do it.
Mm-hmm. So do you have a way to lead people, or is it simply you ask them to be present?
Well, I mean, there might be tricks. So like sometimes one might start a meeting by asking people to take a breath and connect with their own body and feel their feet on the ground or feel their body in the chair. And just take a few slow breaths and notice your body, notice where you are, and notice the other people in the room. And just starting with something like that makes us relax and connect with the physical part of ourselves, and also slow down and be quiet and let it be okay to start with a quiet space and then wait to see what emerges from that.
Mm.
What I felt there, first of all, I included in being present sort of feeling a little nervous or awkward. Like usually it's a little bit sort of awkward to do that. And particularly if there are many people in the room, somebody will get nervous and start talking because there's too much silence. But really the best part is being willing to stay in that silence. And here I noticed that there wasn't particularly anything that came up for me that needed to be said. I was quite comfortable with the silence itself, but I started noticing sort of more movement of energy, sort of more, or maybe even visual, sort of twirling, sort of energy rising up kind of thing, which was kind of pleasant.
Hmm. I felt that in such energy as well. I just wanted to giggle at one stage because it's still. And the wonder of it is I don't need to give it a name. I don't need to say what it's about. I can just enjoy that stirring. It started here and it started whirling up.
Yeah.
And the first thing that appeared in my mind was children playing. So it was extremely playful. It still is. My body's responding to it. On our planet, we're very sensory, so all the senses work together. But there's also curiosity of, wow, imagine all beings can start a conversation, doesn't matter what your discussion, whatever you want to call it, with such type of energy going on within yourself, because it's not about the external world, it's about you. Because my senses is heightening in the process.
Yeah, and that's what's interesting. Like senses are in many ways more useful or interesting than constructing a sentence of what that means or what's supposed to happen. Because it's more, something is obviously happening. It's real. At the same time, it's a little unknown and it's playful, like something is happening. And I don't know where that goes, but that's interesting. So my senses can sort of follow it and interact with it. And that maybe even changes it a little bit to the interaction. And then that's where we get into that our presence and our conversation actually is going somewhere and something is emerging. And we don't know what it is. So we have to be willing to to let go of writing that in advance, that my agenda is, what I'd like to have happen in this meeting. That sort of blocks it. So I like any opportunity of doing something like that. And it's a challenge to bring that into human conversation, which often is more mental ideas, which sometimes means frozen ideas we already have, things we've decided is in a particular way, where this is more about letting it happen. And yeah, then there are things to talk about, but don't start with the talking. Start with what is there, whatever it might be or what appears. And then maybe we can put words on that afterwards, or not. We don't have to.
In my body currently, following the movement, in my belly, there's a movement that the only way I can explain it is to associate it with a baby in the womb. And it's very interesting because it's in the belly itself. It's not in the womb of the physical body on our planet, in this body that I am. And just staying with that movement, I feel my whole experience is opening up. So I'm available to more. On our planet, we refer to this as recognition of being. That in the beginning of any encounter, if only and we also have our own challenges of allowing that to happen because of human nature and the alien nature. And when I say the word alien, it's actually quite appropriate because we're so alien to these type of sensations and movements. So we are in fact alien.
Yeah, that is kind of interesting because, I mean, those sensations are in many ways more real and more grounded. But for humans, it often seems like sort of weird, abstract, woo-woo, something that's not quite there, which is odd. It's sort of a little bit upside down on this planet. The most real things then people can agree on are rather theoretical, sort of very abstract ideas like science or religion, politics, many things that are very abstract, but that people agree that that's just the way it is, even though they're really the most flimsy, abstract kinds of things. And what we actually feel and the energy that's there, our senses, that's really more there. And it's sometimes frustrating. Like I feel as well that I sometimes feel alien, or as somebody who comes to this planet to try to show some things that are useful, that would be helpful for humanity, but that are a little alien for humanity. So like what we're talking about here, we all have a human body which has an enormous amount of material and senses and energy and input, and it's a very multi-dimensional sensory organ that tells us all sorts of things. And yet the majority of us are sort of ignoring that and being busy with one little part, the thinking, abstract thinking faculties, to decide, okay, what's really true, what should I really be doing, where we're missing the whole vehicle we're traveling in. I mean, there's so much there, but humans are strangely missing the instruction manual, or they don't even realize there's anything to know or anything important to do with this amazing vehicle. And that's endlessly puzzling to me. And okay, in my human form, I haven't totally mastered it either. I mean, I can be alien enough to notice that this doesn't quite make sense. There's a puzzle there. This is not quite right. And I could sort of sense some of what would work better. But it's difficult being human. It's difficult to manage all those pieces at the same time. And well, I'm here in part to participate in solving it from the inside, like how humans can figure out how to be better humans. Because really, it shouldn't be all that hard. Like it's just you show up and you're present, you notice what's going on, you try to communicate what you experience, and you flow with it. Try not to be too attached to what happens. It's not very difficult. You don't have to figure out a lot of things, but it is difficult for humans. So I can certainly empathize with that and with my own difficulties of being human.
From where we look, and I use the word you as a collective, is that perhaps humans just never learned how to activate those parts of themselves. So that's why they're so afraid of it. For all the conditioning and conformity and the rules and regulations. And yes, for us on my planet, we're also very excited. That's what we mostly do. That's what most of our experiences are about. It's like a switch to assist in many different playful ways to put on that switch inside. It's like a light you flick on. And once it starts burning, it's almost impossible to kill it. Because the more it is fanned into reality, the more it's just there. You can't do anything about it. You can't control it at some stages. But it is to create and share experiences where people in a non-invasive way, so it's not a direct way, get to experience those sensations and that movement that you were sharing about now, that others might see as woo, yet it's so very real, like you say. But in our experience, when people start to experience it themselves, but not through the mind, because the mind we have realized is a complete block. We've been through 3 very interesting experiments ourselves in the last 18 months relating to this type of experience. And it was very interesting, 3 very different experiences with 3 very different types of people, you can say that. It's simply groups of people who came together organically, and then some of these experiences happened also organically. Nothing was planned, nobody knew what was going to come out of it. In the beginning, perhaps there was an intention, and we were always flabbergasted about what actually, what flowed out of it, not even the outcome. And still is, because it's fascinating to experience when there's humans who's not used to a specific type of experience, that the ones who can hold that energy, that space to do that, the other somehow gets pulled into it. And yes, in the beginning, there's all these opinions and interesting things that's being said that might break that energy flow, but we've seen that it actually doesn't matter, because that energy is there, so we focus on the energy and not getting distracted. I may make it sound very simplistic now, but it's not. I agree it's not. And there's an interesting thing that we discovered in the one group of how certain individuals held a specific you could say that it was a role. So somebody would not say a word, they would just hold the space. So they hold the energy. They don't contribute, they don't physically now, like speaking or sharing or whatever. They also go through the same motions of the energy moving and following it, and see where it wants to go, but they really there to hold the space. Some others are there to translate what is happening, because we've learned that not everybody has the capacity to interpret this, what's happening. And others do, they all have different parts they play. Not a single one is the same. And once somebody realizes in themselves through their experience what magical role they play, something happens also inside of them. It's incredible. It's incredible. But what we also know, it's a challenge, because it seems that because this is so new, when I say new, it's with a lot of respect, that it's easy to go back to the old way. Yeah, it's much easier because you feel safer there.
Yeah,
and you don't need to do something different.
Right. So it's hard. It's vulnerable. It can be hard to explain. But I recognize, and I'm very interested in what you're talking about, like both the skill to be able to hold space for a group, or to keep put a certain energy there. I've certainly noticed that even one person is enough who can somehow bring presence to a group. And it's not always the obvious way it's done, or the obvious person who's doing it. It can be in an awkward way, like somebody might bring up a certain problem or their own uncomfortableness. But by sharing honestly what's going on for them, it can create a certain focus in the group that makes everybody present in a way they weren't before. So I'm interested in the various forms of how to do that, of how to bring us back to being present with the senses and what's unfolding, and being more able to do that at will, like whenever it's necessary. And either as one person who walks into a group and you can do something that suddenly makes us be present. It could be telling a story that's really captivating, that we get into, where it's not about the mind, it's about now we suddenly are following what's happening, and then we're disconnected from our normal sort of judgments and so forth. Or it can be sharing a feeling or an experience, or it could be a magic trick or a show or something that's just fantastic, or that makes us together look at something half impossible and interesting. So I'm interested in all forms of that. And I also find it very interesting, the idea that there could be different ways or different angles of that. Different people could hold different parts, like you say. I mean, one person holding a certain aspect of it without even saying anything about it. And it can be somebody else's job to say what needs to be said, but that's not necessarily the key piece. The key piece might be somebody who just keeps a certain vibe somehow. But all of that is a little, it's weird to talk about, or it's hard to teach or pass on, because it's different. In some way, it's more tangible than what we normally do, but not everybody sees that. But I'm hoping for, knowing or being with more people who do see things like that. So it's not something to persuade people that, hey, there's this other way of doing it. It just comes naturally, that whenever we get together, we can be present. And if just one or several of us have the experience or the skill to be present with it, everybody doesn't have to have it. But they can be brought along, just like lots of people might enjoy a movie without knowing how to create a fantastic, magical movie, but they know how to sit down and eat popcorn and watch it, at least. It's better if we can all participate, but that's it's never going to be perfect. But just that sort of sense or is more available, and we develop more of a vocabulary of what are we even talking about. So that connects back with what I've been exploring with my conversational experiments of trying different types of roles or configurations of doing it, which will have led in many different directions. Like one thing we tried along the way was doing constellations. There are different words for that, but if one is trying to talk about or process a certain situation, like how is the world doing, for example, we can choose different people to play a certain part or incarnate a certain role. So like you over there, you're the ocean, and you are the government, or you are the trees, or it could be different types of things. And then each person steps into a certain vibe and they hold it, and there's nothing particular they have to do. But part of what we noticed there was that it's quite possible to do that. The moment you agree that you are the air on the planet, you suddenly know things that you didn't know before. And in part because it's sort of so ridiculous that it's just not, you cannot really study for that. I mean, the thinking has to go out of it. You just have to say, okay, I'm the air. Oh, I feel I want to blow over here, but I can't because this. Your intuition brings things forward, which is useful, and in many ways that's more interesting and educational than having a serious discussion about the climate, for example. I mean, it might be more productive to be the air and the ocean than to try to study what are really the problems and how do we overcome them.
You really ignite something now in me about this becoming thing. And for us, it's some of the potholes in education is, let me just get something. Okay, I've got a candle here. Now, for a child, you tell them, there's a picture of a candle, especially now with technology. Now, this is not very simplistic, but you tell them this is a candle, but they have no relation to it. So especially if you start speaking about nature and the lights, for example, or becoming even the candle. This is awesome as well. To imagine I'm this candle and to become it. It's a very different relationship I'll have with this candle forever, because I became the candle in that moment of what you're describing. And one thing that I want to share about that is my own experience on our planet, where we were doing dream writing, which is very interesting, because every night we would go dreaming. Nobody taught us how to dream. It was not about that. So every night we went to dream, and we did interesting things that we could remember our dreams every morning and to start writing them down. But the whole purpose was to write about it. So to create a writing project. You can write a book or a blog or whatever it might have been. But the fun part then was during the day, this person who led us through this process for a week long would take a drum, and we would lie down on the floor, and he would make us fall asleep. We're going to a dream world. And then we would wake up. So whatever I dreamt was then the central part of my story that I'd write about, but the other people had to fulfill the roles so that the story can expand, which was fascinating. And it links down with your constellation thing, because there was this, I remember this one woman, she was a forensic person, like the CSI stuff that you see on television on your planet. And so her world is working with corpses. So for the others, this was a very strange world. But we started acting it out. It was incredible. And then the story that she actually started writing through that she published in a book, was extraordinary. And she said still today that the parts that we shared, the roles that we played on her behalf, was just taking the story in its own direction. It had its own life.
Yeah.
And that she could never dream that up herself, or it couldn't come through her. It had to come through these other strangers, people that she didn't know from a bar of soap, to fulfill those roles and to act, and they may come alive and real. So that was fascinating, and you remind me of that now.
Wow, yeah, I think there's a lot of potential and a lot of wisdom in that. Like many things are, we can't really unlock them unless we go into more of a dream space kind of thing. We allow ourselves to move in a more multi-dimensional fashion. So like we're in a world where it seems like there's a lot of problems and things that need to be solved. I mean, but it's a sort of a Gordic knot that's tied in a certain way that we can't unravel it where it is. I mean, but we maybe can by moving in more dreamlike ways, in more dimensions. We can maybe solve it in more fictional ways, so to speak, that we're not attached to that it has to be real, or in another way of looking at it, that we're willing to connect with a deeper and wider reality. I mean, what we consider real is not necessarily really it. It's just the surface picture of something that has many more dimensions to it, some of which are more mythical and more happening in dream space. So by freeing up our ability to move in that, which is part of what we do in that kind of settings, where we give ourselves the freedom to be something different, and not just doing it ourselves, like so it might come from somebody else who's willing to step into your dream or your vision, and they actually have pieces to add to it, which is amazing. So I see a lot of potential in that, in anything that allows us to mix different realms or different levels of sensing with each other, real problems with dream stories. And at the same time, it's like, but it's hard to even describe what is that. But I'm very interested in anything overlapping between these different types of worlds, having the freedom to both live to live your adventure both in the real daily world and mix in what happens in your dreams and aspirations, and to improvise in multiple dimensions at the same time. And I think it's to a large degree an answer to many things, and it's a more real world. And so I think our world might evolve in unusual ways the more we embrace that, which I think in part is happening technologically. Like many people young people particularly are playing games at this point. Soon virtual reality kinds of technologies will be more widespread, where it's easier to step into a totally different world and be somewhere else with some different people, or it's easier to suddenly be an elephant or the sky or something in a very convincing way, where it's not just sort of an idea that I'm imagining it, but that the realities become more fluid. So I think some of those things might make us more comfortable traveling in multiple other realities, where we actually might find some of what we were missing. We might become wiser and find it easier to solve our very hard, serious problems in one of those realities is maybe solved by connecting together in another reality where it's not the same problem, and bringing some of the pieces back. So I'm in some ways very optimistic for that. And I think also our consciousness needs to evolve at the same time to be okay with that. So it's not just what is real and what is fantasy, but that all realities have a validity in some way. And at the same time, the challenge is to maintain one's sanity no matter what reality you're traveling in. It doesn't just mean that anything you imagine you need to get lost in it right away. I mean, the tricky part is in part how to stay grounded and sane even when you're traveling in crazy dreamtime realities at the same time. So that it seems like a paradox. Like, how can you sort of stay sensible and grounded while you're talking about being a corpse in somebody's dream or something?
I can maybe just share what we have learned through many different other experiences as well, in terms of going into such realities, is to start off with a home base. So you create your own reality, but it's your home base. And you start using your body to actually give you reminders of, it's too much now, come back. So it's a two-way thing. And you said something about that elephant, that immediately I visualized this elephant in this game, for example, and you become that elephant. Now, to these senses which we were speaking about earlier, that we're not used to, and this movement in our bodies that we're not used to. If you just take that games that these, especially young people, play these days, is if you really become that elephant, so you become its movement, you are bound to start experiencing some other senses that you're not used to, because they move very differently. They move at a very different speed as well, and different motions. If you just think of an elephant versus a jaguar, and if you ever watched a jaguar move with, very aware, conscious way, and you begin to imagine you that jaguar, it's incredible. Because that way you also start on a subconscious level taking on those movements, those experiences. And it's different because your body's not used to it. Because as humans, we don't have to move like that. So in that way, these virtual realities that are becoming more and more available is really precious. It doesn't matter what people say about it. In terms of technology, it has its gifts.
Yeah. So it's just then at the same time, it would be a problem if I lost that I was a human. So I think, okay, now I am a jaguar. Well, I'm still maybe sitting in front of my computer. So there's sort of a connection that still needs to be there. Not that the human form is the absolute reality of what's there, but to not lose touch with the other things one is at the same time. What was I going to say? Well, there are certain things you can always take with you no matter what the reality is. There's a certain sort of sanity or way of looking at it. You can always count on, like, perceiving things, for example, just taking a breath and sort of looking at, well, what is here? And I learned some things from, it's only occasionally that I have lucid dreams, or dreams where it feels very, very real, that I know I'm in the dream, but sometimes I would get stuck in them. Like I have this occasionally occurring type of dream where I need to get to the airport, something like that. It's often the airport. And once I become aware of, okay, I'm in a dream and I need to get to the airport, and in a dream, it's usually harder to, like, navigate. You try to read instructions, but they're very sort of ephemeral. Like, you read a sign and it changes while you're reading it. And so I try to follow a plan or figure out which train I need to take, and I'm late and I'm looking at my clock, but the clock changes whenever I look at it. So it's all very confusing. But that's when if I let myself just sort of jump around with whatever I see, which is what often happens in a dream. Like, I see something and then I think of something else and suddenly something changes about it. So I get lost. But I didn't realize that, well, a way around that is to just focus on what I want to happen rather than getting lost in the pieces along the way. So I realized what always worked was like, if I focus on the airport, I'm getting to the airport, I would very quickly be there. But if I get lost in tickets and directions and people I meet along the way, then I end up like never getting there. So I discovered sort of a way of navigating that no matter what reality it is, if I just really feel what it is I want, then the rest, the details don't matter. It did quite quickly manifest. I'll be at the airport without remembering even how I got there, kind of thing. So I think there's sort of some ways, I mean, that applies to regular reality too. There's always a way of being grounded, focusing on, okay, where am I? Where would I like to go? Without getting lost in the millions of different things that can go wrong. I mean, we don't notice in the regular reality, but just like a dream, we get distracted all the time. We forget where we're going and suddenly we're somewhere else and it's really complicated. But if we can refocus on what was it I wanted? What do I really feel? Where am I going? Then the details will sort themselves out rather quickly. So I think that's sort of a set of skills or meta skills that will work no matter if you're in a dream or you're going to work or whatever you're doing. There's a certain fundamental sanity which works, which includes being willing to perceive whatever it is, wherever it's going, but at the same time taking it all with a grain of salt and knowing that, well, this is my dream. I mean, I can pull out of it at any time. I can go somewhere else. I don't have to be lost in it either. So there are potential some rules that you can take with you no matter what. And that's the kind of things I'd like to discover and notice, the things you can take with you even when you die and go somewhere else, or even in a dream, that it still applies. There's so many things that you can't take with you, but a few principles you can. It would work no matter where you were or who you were, whether you were an elephant or a table or me. It still applies.
It would be quite interesting to be you in a dream. You know, when you were speaking, and now I have to translate it, because again, it's like that movement. I have no idea what it actually means in this moment. Maybe tomorrow, maybe in a week later, I'll really understand it. But when you're talking about knowing where you are and not to get lost, whether it's another reality or whether it's physical life here, there's something with the hands. There's something with the hands. And if I just think of gaming, there's constant, with whatever tool is being used, there's a constant connection between the body and that game. And that's your physical, pedal to be here, the thing that holds you here. But there's something else about it as well, which I've experienced when working with people in the business world, in sharing, making them aware of other possibilities through creative ways. It's doing and you can do it in a conference, a summit, whatever environment, doesn't matter. In an employee well-being environment, in a strategy session, doesn't matter. But it's to do something that's out of the ordinary. So you make them draw a hand with 7 fingers. And initially, everybody looks at you like you're from Mars. And when you say, yes, I am from Mars, just draw the hand with 7 fingers, because already with that you see much about the human being. It's not about trying to analyzing them psychologically, but you can see the perfection. Where will I put the other 2 fingers, that they all balanced? All sorts of interesting things comes out. Some free draw the hand, and that's beautiful too. And then you start to play with archetypes, and you give them like 7 archetypes, and you ask them to address an issue that they currently have, a problem that they want to solve. Just through them, taking them out of their usual mind frame, because suddenly then you look at this 7 fingers, and each finger is an archetype. And you have to ask, and again, you're going to an improv type situation. What is this archetype saying about this problem? it's fascinating, two things that comes out of it. How people start to think outside of the box, just like that. There's no resistance, because what must I resist to? There's this hand with 7 fingers, and I want to conquer this thing, especially the guys who like the achievers type people. They want to conquer this thing. They want to see what's coming out of this thing, because they're not trying to prove you wrong, but they're really interested, they're curious. And then when they start playing with these archetypes, it's incredible what comes out. And then when you ask them to look at it from a distance, so observe from a distance, look at this hand and what it just told you. Where did that information come from? Just by asking them that question, it opens up something somewhere.
Yeah. So that's what I'm interested in, that the things that work that way, that you can't resist it because it's a little out of the box anyway, so you cannot fit it into your normal pattern. You have to do something else. You have to access something wherever that comes from, and that's the interesting part, to activate that as much as possible. I'm looking for all opportunities to do that, to create a bit of a magical experience where one suspends the normal blocks that one has, and one actually can access something one didn't know one could.
It's interesting what happens when you sense into these type of things emerging. You don't know what it is, but you can feel it. And I'm very visually, so I see a lot of things, but it's in terms of what we were speaking in the beginning about your experiments and our experiments, and the things that you were interested in that you shared with us. I'm specifically fascinated about different ways of learning, because it's not the usual way where all this information is pumped into you and you have to absorb it and you have to internalize it, and then you have to give it again out to somebody else in a different way and share what you've experienced and what you've learned. It's about when we're in these states where we're outside of the normal, we take in so much more without effort. And there's no memorizing necessary or trying to contextualize. It is as if that information coming to you in that way, somehow, and there's no explanation scientifically for it yet, it becomes part of your experience. And you can actually use it, you can share it, you can do whatever you with it. So that's the part that I'm specifically really interested in about, because it will make learning, and we're not talking about studying now, but learning, a very different experience, especially for the younger ones.
Yeah, I'm very interested in that too. I sort of, I think, imagine and believe that learning could be so much faster and more efficient. But if we bring along all the baggage of what we already know, and the way we already have always done things, it's so much harder to learn. But if we can sort of step outside of that and be willing to access everything that actually is available, I mean, it could potentially be totally revolutionized, where we can learn totally new fields very rapidly. Because, I mean, most things we learn, there's not really that many parts to it, but it takes a lot of work to fight all the stuff we already know to get there. So if we could go there a little more directly, move in more fluidly around it, in a space that's more that's less restricted by what we already had, then it could potentially be very different.
We call that a whole body experience, a whole person experience. You're talking about as well. It's not using just one part of the body or the mind or whatever. It's using all your human capacities to experience something. So for us, it's not even learning, it's an experience. And through that, obviously, you learn. You become to know about more things more intimately, because you're having the experience. Now, Flemming, as an alien, I also heard a little birdie saying to me that you are going on some quest soon.
Well,
Is
that's
that
a little.
is that a secret still, or is it?
Well, a quest is always a little bit secret kind of thing, but it fits into some of the same things we're talking about here. Like if you turn your life into a quest or an adventure, then you right away sort of puts it in a different setting where things are a little more fluid. And I think, and there's certain, we intuitively know how a quest works, or how an adventure works, or how a fairy tale or a good story works. Like there's, like somebody gets involved in something, there's some kind of thing you need to do or try to do, and there are some obstacles of some kind. You end up in unusual circumstances, and there are certain things in the way that you need to overcome. And that might be difficult, but if it's a good story, then usually they will get overcome, and there might be several setbacks and several successes, but you end up learning something along the way. And in a quest is not necessarily about finding what you're looking for, but it is about looking for something. Like you're looking for some possibly quite vague and impossible thing, like the Holy Grail in some fashion. You're looking for something, an object, a thing, but you go then on an adventure to find it, and everything that you learn along the way is part of that journey that makes you richer and wiser. And in a good quest, you may maybe never find the Holy Grail you're looking for, but all the things you find along the way are just as valuable. So, and also this is a way to applying a quest to your normal life. It sort of, you reframe things by making them more mysterious and adventurous. And I've often noticed that in my life, that the most ordinary things, if you see it in a certain way and you tell it in a certain way, it becomes a very interesting adventure. Whereas for some people, it might just be, oh, I had a horrible week and the car broke down and this happened. But told a different way, it becomes a quest or an adventure or story with a happy ending where you overcame these difficulties and you were lost and you didn't know what to do, but then you met a new person and you learned this new thing and you ended up with a better car and a new friend, and it was better, kind of thing. And I notice in my own life that some of the periods of my life that have been where things went wrong or bad things happened, that end up being the best stories I have later on, just because either I experienced them like that right away, or I looked at them, I processed them afterwards to figure out where are the gems in what happened here. And that totally changes it. So instead of life being difficult and unfair and challenging and then you die, it can be a quest where you seek things that you might never get, but you're going to do your best to look for them in all sorts of places. And in the process, you change and you evolve and you become a better person and you make new friends and you find treasure in some fashion. So in general, I'm interested in having that way of looking at life and maybe helping others see it that way as well. And I have a particular quest, which is about some of the things we've talked about here, of how to interact in a way where we both are very real and authentic with what's actually going on for us in our lives. And we're willing to bring in sort of dreamlike fictional elements of what we're doing to make it playful and interesting, and to sort of embellish it with this way of looking at it as an adventure, as a quest. And so I see that as potentially a set of tools that help people better deal with their own lives and make them more interesting and more meaningful because right away when it's a quest, it's more meaningful. Even if you're currently in a part where things are difficult and you're lost in the forest without compass, in a bigger story, that's perfectly fine. That you have to have some of those in order to find something later on. And if you just went and found what you were looking for right away, it wouldn't be so interesting. So you have to be lost and in despair once in a while. So anyway, so I see sort of a set of potential tools to help people with their lives, making their lives more meaningful, to accomplish more. And I also see it as potentially a way of interacting or meeting together, that we share quests, or we share where are we or what's going on. And maybe other people have pieces of their discoveries that might be useful to you, just like you might need somebody else to play a part in your dream to see what actually comes out of it. So if we're willing to do that, to leave it rather fluid, that we can play in each other's adventures or dreams and supply pieces to each other. So I'm looking also practically, one of my quests is how to have a space or network or way of meeting where that is possible, and whereas that both is interesting and productive for the people involved, like where you can mix different types of quests. It might be having a very real, tangible project you're trying to develop and get financed and write the business plan and get partners and to manufacture a particular thing. Or it could be a more artistic kind of thing. You're exploring some particular aspect of the color blue, or it doesn't really matter what it is. Or it might be totally just a game where you're trying to find the most Pokemon. It doesn't really matter, but having a way of interacting, existing together with people on different types of quests together. Because part of what that does is it takes away, just by that framing, it takes away some of that mental sort of resistance, judging whether it's right or wrong, or what somebody should do or not do. I mean, if you're on a quest, you need to do some things. It's not about sitting around judging that everybody else's quests are wrong. There are no real wrong quests. I mean, it's a quest is that you're trying to do something, and that you're willing to go through some kind of story to maybe get there. And that's interesting. It's something to share. It's good stories, and you find things along the way, and they're worth sharing, and they all become more meaningful because we're on a quest. So all of that sort of ties together in a quest for myself, and in a space for quests, and in potentially developing more of a vocabulary or set of tools for helping people with quests, and that also as a way of doing very real things that need doing in the world, but not being too attached to whether they are ultimately meaningful for the whole world or not, as long as they're meaningful for the people who participate in them. So that's part of my quest at the moment.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Flemming, for sharing that with my people and your people. So I have a question for you. Can anybody who's interested in your quests and what you're busy doing with it contact you?
Yes.
Can we leave your information for them after this podcast?
Yes, we can do that, and either find me on Facebook or the group Conversational Experiments, which is right now where I'm having a quest as part of that. It fits in quite well, and it can evolve in that kind of direction. So in principle, anybody's welcome. So a requirement is just sort of being somewhat able to deal sensibly with other people in a friendly manner.
Not a caveman who's never experienced any other humans.
Well, I mean, it's harder than it seems. Like not everybody's really very good at being open to other people. I mean, but some learning might be required, and that's fine. So anyway, so yeah, I would be happy to be part of other people's quests and to interact with other people, experiencing interesting adventures in their lives.
Thank you, Fleming. And if you have some last words for especially the ones who came more recently, about questing, for example.
Well, just start by looking at your life a little bit in that lens, as if it was a great adventure. Everything changes the moment you can succeed, even just a little bit, to look at your own life as an adventure where there are puzzles to solve, there's treasure to find, there are interesting companions to run into, difficulties to overcome, but lots of things to gain and to learn and to become wiser. And life really is like that. But if it, by just changing your perspective a little bit and seeing some of that in your own life, everything will quite instantly become more magical and more meaningful.
Thank you, Fleming. Hello, everybody, and thank you for being with us from with me and Fleming here today. And like Fleming so graciously agreed upon, that we can share your details after this podcast, that you can pick his brains and or his whole body for that matter about questing. My body is responding to all of this in very interesting ways, which I'll not necessarily share now. But thank you, everybody, and we'll see you soon again. Goodbye.